Good afternoon. It's Saturday the 18th of March. My name is Jared. I am a crocheter and knitter, and as you will see from this video, I'm also now a weaver and a sewer. I wouldn't say I'm very good at any of these crafts yet. I'm a talented beginner, is about as far as I would put it. I do very much enjoy the crafts, and I'm enjoying the process of learning them as well, which I think is also very important. Enjoying the process of learning is almost as important as learning itself. I was off sick last year from work for about 6 months. I'm a lot better than I was. But as a result of being off work, I had a lot of time in my hands. But I didn't really want to be doing anything too strenuous, arduous, taxing, intellectually taxing. And so I learned how to crochet. I don't really understand why I've not come across crochet before. I hadn't. It was a real blessing to me. It occupied my hands. It gave me something to think about without having to think too hard, which meant I wasn't caught up in myself and my situation at the time. And that was very helpful in speeding up my recovery time. But the great thing about crochet as well is that you can make things to give to people. And unfortunately, I have given, unfortunately because I can't show you anything, I have actually given away every single item that I've ever crocheted. I do have a couple of projects going on at the moment, which I've talked about previously. With the one in particular is the pirate flag. I have made some further steps forward on that this week. It takes quite a while at the moment to make any step forward, because I'm getting to the longest part of the flag, which is the line 70. So there are 70 blocks. I'm doing what's known as a corner-to-corner Afghan, or Grafghan, where a picture can be created out of those blocks, and the picture I'm creating is a Jolly Roger flag. So it's a skull and crossbones on a black background. I'm nearly at line 70, I'm on line 68 or 69. And I think probably in the next 20 lines, I'll begin to feel that the end is in sight. One of the great advantages of a Grafghan is the fact that you start very small, so you get a lot done very quickly, so you get very inspired. Then you get to the middle bit where it just feels like this is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because actually it is. And then as you get towards the end, you're getting smaller and smaller and smaller again, so it speeds up all the way down, because you're losing 1 block per row that you do. So as you get to line 70, you've got 70 blocks, but line 71 only has 69, and line 72 has 68. So by the time you get to line 140, you've got 1 block, and it's fantastic. So I am hopeful that that will be finished in the not too distant future. I'm just going to count the number of lines I've done here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Excellent. Is that correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, so I can change colour. I'm doing blocks of 10, so it's 5 each way. This week, last Saturday in fact, I went online and I bought 2 items. The first, I have a very basic sewing machine. It's very, very basic. It's fine, it works very nicely, but it doesn't really do very much other than the basics. Which is a Toyota SP100. And I was watching Create and Craft, as I do from time to time, particularly as we're moving towards spring, so it must soon be time for the Christmas decorations and items to appear, and those of you who know me will get that joke. They have a special pick of the week item, which has usually got very good value discounts. And last weekend it was the Brother FS130 QC sewing machine, which is normally retails for about £600, and they were selling it for £2.99. And if you joined the club for £20, you also got 10% discount on top of the 50% discount. So it was £2.70, £2.69, £99. And added to that, it was available on 4 easy payments. So I pay £80 a month, I guess. No, £70 a month it must be, just shy. That's right. So I ordered one, and it arrived on Thursday evening. Well, it arrived Thursday during the day, but I got it Thursday evening when I returned home from work. And I opened it up on a YouTube video, which was an extra episode that you can find on my channel. But also, at the weekend, I decided I had got a little frame loom, and I'd eventually worked out how it worked. But I realised it was going to be very limiting in what it was able to do. It was useful for learning those very basic techniques, but not much more beyond that. And I'd watched a few YouTube videos, and an item that came up time and time again on those videos was the Kromsky harp. So I went onto eBay, and I found a very good retailer. Crafty Sisters 2014 is their username. And I bought a Kromsky harp, and it was very reasonably priced, including the postage and packaging. It came extremely well packaged. I bought it on either Saturday night or Sunday morning, and it arrived as well on Thursday. So I had 2 packages to open when I got home. The harp is this item you can see on my lap. I'll bring the camera around and give you a better view of what it is. It's going to be quite difficult to see because of the lighting from behind, but it's called, sorry about this, terrible camera work, it's called a rigid heddle loom, and this is the rigid heddle. So I'll put it into the neutral position, which is the middle. And what you'll see is that all of the warp threads, the ones that go up and down away from me, which are held under tension, go through this heddle. And each of the white verticals is a reed, and there's a slot between each of them and an eye in the middle of each of them. And one thread of the warp goes in and out of each slot or eye. I'll put you back now. So, whoops, sorry, not quite the right position. Terrible camera work, I'm very sorry about that. And so when you raise the heddle to the top position, the threads through the eyes are raised above the threads through the slots. And the gap in between is called the shed. And when you put the heddle into the lower position, the reverse happens, that the threads through the eyes are now below the threads through the slots. There's still a gap, it's still called the shed, but when the heddle is up, it's the upper shed or the top shed, and when the heddle is down, it's the lower shed or the bottom shed, whichever you prefer. There's a magic rinky-dinky little tool here, used for threading the heddle. This is a slaying tool, or a slayer, S-L-E-Y-E-R, and it fits both through each of the slots and also through the eye in the heddle. And the Kromsky harp is very popular. One of the big reasons is it's so well made. It is a very attractive, it's nice to touch, it's got a lovely feel, it's very well finished, it's very smooth, turned pieces, and it just feels, it's almost like a work of art in itself. This version is called the Chromsky Harp Forte. The previous version, on the ratchet, there's a ratchet at the front and the rear tension beams, which are these at the back. And the earlier version was made with plastic, and I think they had problems with the plastic. These are now made out of metal, and hence the name Forte, stronger, or strong. It also has a clamp in the middle which unfastens, and if I was to take the tension off the weaving, I could then fold it in half and store it in a much smaller space than the harp itself, when it's opened, occupies. It came with 2 shuttles for the yarn to go on. That's 1, that's 2. And also a pickup stick. The pickup stick is used to allow almost like tapestry weaving, where you can make little designs within the weave that don't necessarily just have to go with the up and down, up and down. When you pass the shuttle from one side to the other, so when I pass it from right to left, I always have the heddle in the up position, which means that the last thread, I have it in the up position, so the last thread would be in the lower part, below the eye, because the last thread's in a slot. When I then move it to go from left to right, I move the heddle into the lower position, opening the lower shed, which then moves that final thread in the slot above the eye, which has the effect of wrapping the yarn around the final strand, and the vice versa at the other end. The single biggest problem that a new weaver has, and I have faced it in the day or so that I've been weaving, is getting the right kind of tension and the right amount of thread at the ends of your work, so that you don't either have too loose a tension, which means that you have big loops of thread at each end, or too tight a tension, which means that the thread is doing what's called drawing in, where it pulls the outer threads in and narrows the work that you're working on. The ideal edge for a piece of weaving is straight up and down. If you draw in or loosen it up, you end up with quite a sinewy curve. I'm quite pleased with the consistency I'm getting when I'm just plain weaving. Possibly because of my experience with crochet and knitting, I feel I'm getting the right kind of tension. I feel comfortable with the more or less straight edge. It's never going to be perfect. I'm not a machine, and that's the beauty of this. I'm not a machine, I'm a human being weaving. When I was doing, again, I'll move the camera for you. Sorry about this, not an earthquake. I have tried my hand. Sorry, that was a rather big close-up of me then. I'm not sure that you were expecting that. Can I get this in view? Yes. I have tried my hand at a certain amount of... Oops, sorry, I'm working back to front. There we are. There we are. So I saw a pattern on YouTube and I slightly adapted it, and these are little houses. I think you can see. Nice red roof and white building. It will be a lot easier to see once I've completed the work. Let me just put that back. There we are. I'll put you a little bit more vertically. But as I was doing that, I noticed that on a few of them, the lines were pulling in, or I was leaving too big a loop. I'm not going to be overly critical of myself. I'm a new weaver, obviously, and I'm quite satisfied overall, I'm developing the techniques, and with practice will come, not perfection, but a more consistent result. I don't know if I've actually mentioned my tea today. It's just the spiced ginger, the usual spiced ginger tea. It's a little grey, a little overcast. We've had a lovely day earlier this week. It was so warm and sunny. But there's a chill breeze blowing today. However, there are leaves on the trees, there are blossoms in the trees, there are daffodils and crocuses flowering all around me. So I think we can definitely say, even though it's 3 days technically till spring, that spring is very much with us. Excuse me. So, as you probably have discovered with just my very imprecise descriptions of what I'm doing, there's a huge technical language to learn around weaving. Each time you pass the shuttle across, it's either a shot or a pick. People tend, I don't know why, but pick seems to be the word that people use. They're interchangeable. They mean the same thing, but people talk about picks. So you might talk about a 10-pick pattern, meaning that the pattern itself is 10 passes of the shuttle across, so it's 5 in each direction. Sorry, there seems to have been an issue there. I need to just address why that happened. Let me just pop that back. The nice thing about this harp is it encourages you to sit properly, effectively, for want of a better word, because, yes, it didn't go through the last one. That's the reason. You brace it against the top of the table. There are a couple of legs on the brace here, which I think you can see there. And they brace against the table, and you rest the lower part against your legs or stomach. And the heddle is exactly my arm's length away from my shoulders, so I'm sitting upright the whole time, and the work is just above my lap, so it's all within easy touching distance. I don't have to stretch, I'm not leaning over, I'm not getting a pain across my neck or anything like that, which it would be so easy to do, I think, but that's not been an issue for me, which I'm very pleased about. I have been doing other things than the weaving. I mean, it took me around about 45 minutes to build the harp when it arrived on Thursday. It came in pieces, but it was very clear instructions on how to put it together. There were only some wood screws, nothing very difficult. And then I spent a couple of hours yesterday evening warping the loom, which I'll talk about. This loom comes with, on the back there are these holes, and I have a set of dowels that fit those holes, which very conveniently fit into my lovely orange bag, my orange and blue zipper bag. So these dowels fit in the back, and that's also where the clamps are as well, which I'll talk about. So you can either use, it's what's known as a warping board. So you have a series of these dowels, and because you often want to warp something that's a lot bigger than the machine that you're using, you can wrap the warp threads around the dowels, and so significantly increase the yardage of what your warp is going to be. And then you cut it loose from the warping board, and then wrap it onto your rear brace, and then onto your front brace. The other method of warping is to have the yarn attached to the rear tension bar of the loom, and then have a warping peg set up at a distance away. And this machine comes with a clamp to hold the loom firm on the table, and another clamp to hold the warp peg firm, which I used a chair. This is the method I used last night. And then you simply warp between the machine and the warping peg, and then cut the warp off the warping peg and thread it through the heddle and wrap it onto the front tension bar in exactly the same way. So I think probably for any... I did a 2-yard, so 6 metre warp. I think for anything more than that, I'd probably use the warping board. For anything that size or less, I know that I have a 2 metre distance from the edge of that table, or where the tension bar is when I clamp the machine to the edge of that table, to where the warp peg is when I clamp it to a chair that I place against my bed. That's very useful. It's a set distance. I don't have to keep measuring it, so I know if I want 2 yards or 6 metres approximately, that's going to be the way to do it. So, having spent Thursday night opening my new toys and Friday nights and Saturday morning playing with my new toys, I haven't done that much knitting and crocheting since Wednesday, really. I got to a point with my jumper that I'm making where I have to change ball. So I've normally been knitting this on the bus, and actually one or two people who sat down next to me said, "Oh, I've never seen a man knit before." Not in a negative way. Excuse me, I'll just have some more tea. Not in a negative way, just curious, which I suppose is probably true. I mean, I've mentioned about the items that are made for crafting, and it's presumed that you're going to be female. But there are actually quite a lot of men who take part in fibre arts. I mean, weaving is traditionally a very masculine craft. Certainly before the Industrial Revolution, the woman of the home would be carding and spinning the wool, and the man of the home would be weaving it in homes where there was a weaver. Anyway, that all aside, people have quite enjoyed watching me knit, I think, and have expressed interest rather than anything else. So I've been knitting to and from work on my jumper and using some of my lunch breaks as well. Most importantly, for a jumper, it fits over my head quite comfortably and fits quite snugly around my neck without feeling tight. So that's excellent. The garter stitch panel, I think, is much more noticeable now. You can see the garter stitch running down here. The raglan increases are also much more noticeable. I mentioned that this is the only seam in the jumper. It's not really a seam. You can see there's quite a definite point both there and there. The reason for that is just the fact that there is I think this is just coming out of the garter stitch. The reason for this quite pronounced seam-like structure is just the increased front and back loop that happens just before and just after that stitch. And it creates this effect. So it looks like a seam, but in fact it will be a seamless jumper. Once I've finished the raglan increases, I will put some waste yarn to hold the live stitches for the arms on both sides, and then just continue the tube down for the rest of the body. And having finished that, I'll then go back and do each of the tubes for the arms. So they won't actually be seamed. It's a single item construction. But that's coming along. As I say, I'm about to change to a different ball, so I just need to concentrate while I do that. I have been continuing to work on the pirate flag. As one of the beauties of doing corner to corner Afghans is that you start very quickly because you start with 1 block and then 2 blocks and then 3 blocks, so that's the first 3 rows. But by the time you get to row 55, you're doing 55 blocks. And row 70, which is the middle row, or 70, 69 is probably the middle row. I think you have to have an even number, an odd number rather, but anyway, whichever. Approximately row 70, you've got 70 blocks. And then row 71, you've only got 69 blocks, and row 72, you've only got 68 blocks. So by the time you get to row 140, you're back down to 1 block. So you tend to have this very quick start, then the hard slog through the middle, and then the very quick finish. So you feel as if you're gathering pace, because you're finishing this line, that's another line done, finish this line, that's another line done. And it gets quicker and quicker and quicker, so you kind of feel as if you're running, rather than plodding through the same ode that you can feel like with some blankets in using different forms of construction. I'm on about row 66, 67, something like that, so I'm at the more or less at the longest part of it, so it's taking a bit longer to get these lines done, but once they're done it should start to speed up and I should get towards the end very quickly after that. So that's happening, but at the moment I'm concentrating on the weaving. This weekend I've just decided that this is going to be what I'm doing, and that's that. You know, make the decision, stick with it. As I say, the other item I bought is a sewing machine, and it comes with a lot of built-in functions. It's a digital machine, so it has 130 stitches, plus a built-in font that can be done to different sizes. I haven't used it yet, but I'm quite looking forward to it, and it will be very useful for this because in fact it has an overcast stitch which will help to secure the ends of the top and the bottom ends of the weaving, so that it becomes a proper piece of fabric that can then be turned into something else, rather than having to have tassels and so on, which is fine if you're making scarves, but if you want to make fabrics that are going to be then used to make other items, you need to have some way of securing those first and last weft lines, because it's very easy for them to slip. Once it's off tension, it's very easy for them to slip out of place. So what will happen is I will finish them, overcast them, and then block them. Even though I'm using acrylic yarns on this, they have quite a halo on them, and I have blocked these things before, and they do actually swell up. They're very good at mimicking the action of normal wool. And obviously if I use baby alpaca or blue-faced Leicester wool, that will bloom up once it's washed in warm soapy water, which will then make the fabric more like a fabric and less like the kind of undulations of yarn going across the weft. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having that done and turning this into something using my new machine, which is, I didn't need a new machine, but it was very convenient to be able to get it from Create and Craft, and I've become a member, so that means that I get 10% off everything if I buy through them. I still want to be able to buy mostly from my local shops, because it's important to support your local retailer, otherwise you'll lose them. But there is also a limit to what the local retailer can actually stock because of the limitation of space and the demand of their customers. And also there's sometimes a limit to the relative cheapness of an item, that you can get better discounts sometimes online. So it's an interesting balance that you have to maintain between supporting your local economy and maintaining custom at a shop in order to maintain the shop, whilst at the same time not having to pay more than is reasonable for what you want to buy. Just the other thing to mention, you'll notice that there's actually paper here. The paper is just to separate the warp. So as you wrap it over, if you wrapped it over into itself, they'd start sticking together and it would become very difficult to separate them. As you unwind them, you can end up with twisted warps and all the rest of it. This is actually freezer paper, so it's slightly thicker paper in that it's waxed on one side, so it's ideal for this. And I've got one at the top and one at the bottom. Again, just to keep the yarns separate from each other once they've actually been wound on or wound off. Yeah, so I don't really have very much else in terms of works in progress. I just wanted to say, so I bought the loom on eBay from Craft Sisters, and this is their card. Yes, you can see that, that's fine. And that's the back of their card. Again, I'll just let the light settle down, if it will. Yes, there we are. It's quite an attractive card. It was very reasonably priced. It came within 4 days, which was excellent. It was extremely well packaged. There was no damage to any of it in transit. It's beautifully turned wood, and it would have been awful if there'd been scratches or cracks on the wood. It's a really lovely item to touch. As you can see, I keep stroking it, and it's very tactile. Wood is a very tactile substance anyway. So I would thoroughly recommend their shop on eBay. If ever you need to find anything that they might be selling. Create and Craft, I got the sewing machine half price because it was their pick of the week last week, and I also got it 10% off because I joined their club, so I basically paid £270 for it, which is very reasonable. And on top of that, sorry, I just need to work out what on earth is going wrong with my... it's because I didn't change the shed. See, there's always a solution if you just look for it. Don't panic. And again, it came within 4 days. It came very well packaged. Everything was intact. I got lots of different feet with it. So I've got a walking foot to do quilting. I've got buttonhole foot, zipper foot, embroidery foot for the fonts, several zigzag feet. I mean, there are probably a dozen feet in the little extras box, plus an extra wide table, so that's even better. So if I'm doing a larger item, I can keep it on the table and going around. So I'm really very pleased with it. It will also allow me to do double stitching, so on any of the decorative stitches I can have 2 bobbins in contrasting yarns, and it will stitch both of them together at the same time. So it's 2 double needle. So I'm really looking forward to playing with it once I've mastered and feel comfortable with my weaving, and once I possibly have some fabric that I want to make something with. So I've not been watching a huge amount of TV this week, so I don't really have any recommendations on that front. In fact, I barely watch TV, other than YouTube videos on weaving in particular, and a few of my regular podcasts. The Grocery Girls. Jodie is terrible. She told a story this week, which is hilarious, about the conversation she had with the person she thought was her daughter in the next toilet stall in the hotel where she was staying. It wasn't her daughter. Her daughter was washing her hands at the sink opposite. And she tells it in excruciating detail and portrays her sister. You can see that when they were children, Jodie would do things in order to set Tracy off laughing. And yes, it's lovely to see their relationship on TV, on YouTube. And I mean, they're lovely people, and they have this excellent new podcast on the Craftsy YouTube channel, which is different enough from their regular podcast to make it worth watching both. But I thoroughly recommend the Grocery Girls. They are a real hoot, but not for the faint-hearted. Certainly not Jodie. Yes, I don't really have a lot else to talk about, really. So, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up. If you want to keep up to date with when I'm posting new videos on this channel, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you for spending some time with me, and I shall see you next week.